So is this our last winter? Is this our last winter blast?
I don't feel like it. Didn't the groundhog say something about that?
That's Pennsylvania. That's Pennsylvania.
He's our only hope.
I saw another first yesterday. It's called Frost on the Roofs.
Wow.
I mean, I've seen it before, but not here. What, Jack?
We've had it before, yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness.
And we'll have it again.
Well, this is the largest accumulation I've seen, though.
Yeah. Sure beats scraping the windshields.
Yeah.
Sure beats sitting in
Had
a
to
nice,
pull out the credit card.
Sure beats what, Jack?
sitting in a nice cold car trying to get it started.
Oh,
Right.
uh-huh. Memories. All right, it's 10 o'clock. Why don't we get started? This is the CROA Board of Directors workshop for Friday, February 5th, 2021. I'll call the meeting to order. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt, it's Vanessa.
Hi, Vanessa. Good morning. Thank you,
Good morning.
Vanessa. I need a second. I see Brian and Diana.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Brian. We have a few discussion items. First is facilities update. I saw that's part of the packet and had a suggested action item or item to discuss about at-risk hours. Nikki, are you on?
Yes, I am. Good
Oh,
morning,
great,
David.
great. Good morning. Good morning. Do you want to do any highlights on this?
The only highlight that I have to offer was the at-risk hours. So we had a few phone calls in regards to residents wanting to use the lap lanes Mondays and Wednesdays. So we provided two options. Just looking at the reports that we have between the hours of 7 and 10 p.m. We've reported only 2 residents utilizing the pool. So just reviewing just the reports that we have.
I've deleted it, so why can't I exit this? Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, so what's
Okay.
your the current go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No.
So the current, as of right now, we have Lakeside and Spring Park Pool for at-risk hours between the hours of 7 to 12 p.m.
Right.
So I would make a recommendation of just keeping one pool at-risk hours from 7 to noon, Spring Park, and then have Lakeside open for residents to utilize the lap swimming pool. Mainline pool, I mean.
And so the 2 bullets here do one of the following. So you're recommending the first bullet. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Okay. So Lakeside would no longer have at-risk hours, just to clarify.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Anything else on the report before we discuss this as a board and then open it up to residents?
And then just to keep you all informed, tennis courts, our team is closely monitoring this a little bit more since we're reaching capacity towards the evenings.
Right.
So we just ask that residents continue to provide their CROA IDs when our park monitors ask for them.
Okay, right. And so that's a little more in the evenings than has been in the past.
Correct.
Okay, good. How about any discussion from the board on these? And then I see a hand up. So any board discussion? Vanessa?
Yeah, I'll just put a motion on the table. I motion to keep the at-risk hours at Spring Park on Mondays and Wednesdays, and Lakeside to open to all residents per management recommendation. That's my motion.
Thank you.
This is Mary Ann. I'll second that.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Welcome aboard. Glad you're here. Okay, any other board discussion before we open to resident comment? And again, just to clarify, you're just reporting an average of 2 residents at any one time. 2 residents. Nikki, just to clarify, that's 2 residents over that entire time span?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
It's not at any one time. It's 2 residents collectively over that 3-hour period.
Well, it would be
That's
when
correct.
they had somebody actually monitoring or looking at the pool.
Right, whenever someone is there. That's all you've seen.
Correct.
Okay. Any other board discussion? I see Lee.
Hey, thanks a lot. Just on this point, we have to remember that this is winter time. So the rules we need to think about when it gets warmer. The reason why you have so few people in the pool right now is because it's a lot colder. So, but I agree. The at-risk hours, and I'm a person that swims, is that when I did the lap lanes, I signed up for the lap lanes even during at-risk hours because you're completely separated from. So, but Lakeside seems to be the place to place to do that. So I agree. I did want to bring up a couple things. First is I just operationally, I think that it would be great if you ask for resident comment before board makes a vote or even seconds and does that kind of stuff. I think that would just be more fair. It gives an opportunity for residents to kind of speak before the board makes up their mind to kind of do something. That would be better. And I want to throw that out. But let me, the reason why I called was for two things is I wanted to bring up about the fields. I didn't get a chance to talk about that last time and I'll be brief.
No, let's hold on that. We're coming to that. That's our third agenda item.
Okay, so and then the last thing is the facilities is I have not heard an update about the electrical chargers. And I think that David, you said that this was a test and it was a 2-year test. And I'm wondering what the criteria for the test is. Are we going to say it's successful if it's been used, at a 24-hour day, it's being used 10 minutes or, so I would wonder if staff came back with a recommendation, because again, it's cold out, but it's going to be warm and we're going to have a lack of parking at some point. So I just wanted to make sure that we had that on the radar before it got warm again. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the general protocol, just to your first point, is we have to have a motion in a second so we can discuss and then we can have resident discuss. So that's why we have that. It actually puts it on the table formally. So that's actually part of Robert's rules. You put it on the table before you discuss it. And then we have resident comment, which I think is important to do. And then the charging station, that's not part of this, what we're talking about. We'll address that separately. Any other resident comment on this particular motion? Okay, let's call the question. All in favor?
Wait.
Oh.
Joseph just raised his hand. I don't know. Joseph, do you still, Joseph, did you still need? Yeah, it's okay. Joseph, do you still need it?
Sure. I just want to make a comment that, again, lap swimming and pool reservations has become a talking point. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure what that means. So, what? Anyone help on that? It's a talking point. We're voting on that.
It's a statement that, similar to previous meetings, that lap swimming is a common request and a common scheduling situation for recreation facilities. Just making sure that people make a mental awareness that it's a continual thing.
Oh, I see. Okay. Got it. Okay. Any further discussion? Thank you, Vanessa, for identifying, Joseph. That didn't show on my screen. Any further discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Hi.
Is there any opposed? I think all 5 of us have voted yes, and I don't think Kevin is on at this point. Okay, next agenda item is the CROA investment guidelines. What was shared was old guidelines that were almost a decade old. And then, Brian, you can take the lead on this, but it was through the Finance Committee wanting to update that.
Sure. The Finance Committee, as a refresher for everybody, was adopted with the charter review passage in March of 2020, and we got the group staffed and launched in early June of 2020. One of the things that we tackled later in the year was a complete review of the investment policy. The old policy was adopted in 2011. A lot has changed since then. We went through several iterations, had good conversation around this. I will hit the highlights. So on this first page here, and I'll look at 1A here, this is from the old investment guidelines, and we had a lot of conversation around this, and we wanted to keep it. We thought safety, liquidity, and yield were very important. So no change there. If you go to the top of page 2, whoever's running the thing, can you blow it up just a little, whoever's doing it? If you look at items A, B, C, and D, we kept those the same. They were there, and that applied to all assets that were under the old investment policy. And we thought, when you talk about, and I'll go through more detail here in a minute, but when you were talking about investable securities, especially that you might need in the shorter term, like in an operating account or something like that, that even though yields right now are de minimis, as we all know, those are the right places to have it. You've got protection and everything in place. We added E, which David had made a comment that it really shouldn't be an E. It should probably be part of the major paragraph. And we said any other investment alternatives require the recommendation of the Finance Committee and the approval of the board. So we've really trying to get the Finance Committee front and center in reviewing and looking what's going on. What we have done in item 3, replacement reserves, in the first paragraph, the last sentence there, we have come to the conclusion to recommend to the board that 20% of the replacement reserve funds balance may be invested in longer term securities than that we show in 2A through D for short-term investment risk. And a lot of places I talk about the Finance Committee, I need to make clear here, the treasurer or the president is part of the Finance Committee. So that's why you'll see reference to the Finance Committee, because the board has a member who's automatically on that committee, part of 7 people, and we have 6 volunteers. So one change there in the first paragraph of A is we're saying you could have something more long-term in nature. In second paragraph there, and the third paragraph, we really talk about, you could have, like in the third paragraph, a balanced fund that would hold a mixed basket of investments, including equities. There are different alternatives out there that, dividend stocks or longer term bonds type things and stuff like that, where you might be able to get, who knows, 3, 4, 5% in a safe environment as opposed to 0.001. And we picked 20% because that's represents amounts that you could have a long-term investment horizon on. The fund, the replacement reserve fund today has almost $2 million in it. And you have a lot of cash that is being gathered for things that will not be replaced for 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years. So that's why we think you could take a little longer risk there. And as a control, the investment alternative must be recommended by the Finance Committee and approved by the CROA board before it may be utilized. So nothing is being taken away from the board. We're just trying to create flexibility. And then in the fourth paragraph under 3, David had made a comment that this probably should be an item 4 to itself, which I think is probably true. It's the responsibility of the Finance Committee to monitor, assess, and report to the CROA board on the asset mix, duration, returns, and risk profiles. I think we'll actually change to have a standard monthly report from the investment committee that would speak to investment composition and that type of stuff. So the board gets more than what we're providing today. Although today it's really pretty safe and short term. Really, we hold it predominantly cash and money markets for the most part. Then the next place I want to go is at the bottom there of this page, bottom under item right there. So we are making a formal recommendation that is in keeping with the CIA, which is the Community Associations Institute professional recommendation, that we have 3 months of operating expenses on hand at any one time, which for us would be about 1.2 million. And really, I think that's probably on an average basis that we would be talking about this, because we'll have a lot of cash come in January. Will be high, so we don't want to get rid of it. We know it'll burn down over time, so we'll look at the long-term trend of cash there so that we're doing the right thing for the community. But that's our recommendation there. And then if you go to the top of the next page, Dave, or whoever's running it,
Probably Patrick.
okay, Patrick, next page. So, okay, so here, what we are recommending today, we have had a operating account, we've had a replacement fund, we've had a capital fund, and we've had a contingency fund. The capital fund and the contingency fund are solely at the discretion of the board. What we recommend is that we merge the contingency fund into the capital fund so that we have one fund. So we have one fund. So we have our operating account, which will have 3 months worth of expenses, our replacement reserves, which are at an amount that's set in the engineering study that we do every 3 years. And then the rest of it would be in capital funds. Those capital funds can be used for any purpose the board determines, and the expenditures of those is subject to board oversight. I say in the first sentence there in the second paragraph that the finance committee says we should have a floor of 250. That's really a minimum of 250. So again, the board is authorizing expenditures anyway out of this account. So we're just trying to make it smoother, easier management, smaller number of accounts so that we could track it carefully. And then in the next paragraph, it is responsive to the finance committee to recommend specific investment composition to the board. We would take on that responsibility. This would formalize that, and there would be reports to the board on asset composition, any recommendations, and results thereof. So what we're really trying to do is take investment management and move it up a little more in finance committee responsibility. I think we've got a good finance committee with good people. And this really tries to tailor it from something that was written in May or adopted in May of 2011 to something that I think is more, and the finance committee thinks is more relevant for the first quarter of 2021. And I'd be happy to take questions or comments or anything.
Very good. That's very helpful, Brian. So two clarifications. One of which, just to reiterate what you're saying, you're proposing operating funds, replacement reserve, and capital and contingency. So the change is merging capital improvements and contingency. And contingency in the past has been what we set aside for hurricane repair, if you will. I mean, just to cut to the chase.
That is a true statement. But if you think about hurricane repair and stuff like that, we've expanded our insurance purchases and everything significantly, so that really, if we had a hurricane cause significant damage, it might cost us $50,000 or $100,000 in a really, really bad year for our, deposits that we would have to pay towards the insurance, and the rest is all covered by insurance. So really, we just got $500,000 sitting there in a fund called contingency. When could we really use it? And we went to that a couple of years ago because we were moving slowly towards combining funds and figuring out what we really needed. And our recommendation of the finance committee is we just need one account, which is capital improvements. We know that's totally discretionary and under the direction of the board. So we're saying just put all the discretionary stuff together, and the board manages carefully. And that's why we would say set the minimum, so we force a conversation if the board ever started spending money and needed to think about that.
Right. Okay. So on that minimum, just again, that also has to be approved by the finance committee, or just the board?
The minimum, it would be set right here. It would be approved by the board. The
Right, but to go,
recommendation of the finance committee was the 250, but it's being set in this resolution.
Understand. And then in the future, if you want to go below that floor, is it just up to the board? Or it doesn't need the finance committee
discretion. So the finance committee, clearly understands it runs and operates at the discretion of the board.
Okay. Then the second broad question is, when you're talking about all of this and this funding, like you said, I think our replacement reserves are about 2 million right now. Does that include service areas? Does this policy include, I know CROA is holding that funding, but it's for the different service areas. What's that relationship?
I know the service areas all have replacement reserves. I would not invest for service area funds in anything other than the straight vanilla stuff, because it's not of a size to be a benefit. And most service areas have a little cash and then they grow it, they fix a roof, they do a painting job,
Right.
it goes back down. It is different than how CROA works, where we hold
Okay.
some for much longer term projects.
So
I would
that's separate. This is all CROA funds, not the service area funds under CROA.
that certainly would be that was our intent.
Okay.
And I could
Just to clarify that. That's helpful. That's helpful. Other board comments, then we'll go to residents.
I have
I
a
just-
question, Brian.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Mary Ann. Oh, Diana, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So it was originally set up to have the contingency fund. Why was it set up that way? Do you know, or was it just standard at the time? And it's not required, just leave it that way, I guess.
We actually kind of created that account in 2018 when we were reviewing all the structures and put it in place. And we didn't put it in place with a vote. We really said, okay, let's just have some contingency funds. We have evolved financial management. And back then we were getting a lot of people on the board, including me, better and up to speed and everything. And at this point in time, the board's, I believe, pretty darn well educated. And we now have a finance committee that spent a lot of time getting up to speed. So I actually think it creates more confusion to have 500,000 over there. And then, okay, what do we do with the capital funds and stuff like that? Because back then we did not have the replacement reserves locked down. We have done that with the charter change at March of 2020. So we've created safety there. So I think we've just evolved. That is the argument for doing it. Or if we're going to keep it, I think 500,000 is too much.
Okay. All right, thank you.
This is Vanessa. Brian and Finance Committee, thank you so much for doing this. It's extremely comprehensive. It sets a great scope for expectations. I applaud the efforts. I'm good with the document. There was a couple of, I know, typos and stuff like that that both we had gotten some on chat as well as from David on some edits. A couple questions that were out there is, does this require a vote to the community? I don't believe it does, on a personal note. And I say that because it's both the pools of money are all on they're to the board's discretion versus having to have a set account. So
Right,
that's
I agree with you. There's nothing in the charter or bylaws that says you got to have structured accounts. The replacement reserves is required by law, and we locked that down with the charter review. Operating accounts are operating accounts, and the rest of it is totally fungible at the board's discretion. So
and then and then Mary Ann basically in her chat said that she also agrees too. So I'm done.
Yeah, this follows nonprofit status guidelines, according to Mary Ann. Any other board comments? I think this looks great. I mean, it was a clear read, and I just appreciate the depth. And I think it's also good protection. I think this finance committee, just the conceptualization of it was great. I'm glad it was approved in the charter change, and I'm glad they're embracing these responsibilities for our community. So I think that's marvelous.
I think
Anything
we
else
have a hand or two up. I saw Lee put his.
Yeah. Anything else from the board? Then I'm going to Lee. Okay, Lee.
Hey, thanks. I agree. Did a great job with this. My only question and concern would be the wording that says the finance committee has to approve the change of the structure. I don't have it in front of me, or I'm not looking at it, but the finance committee is not a charter committee, and there may not be a finance committee some point. So there may be some wording that may be added if there is not a finance committee at the time, then the board could approve. Because if you wanted to make changes, if the board wanted to make changes, they're required to go to the finance committee for approval. The approval has to be from the finance committee first, and then the board, the way it's written right now. And there may not be a finance committee, or maybe you don't have enough seats, or you can't get quorum. And I would just recognize that maybe down the road how that's worded, and maybe there's a wording that could help with that. And I just wanted to say that. But I think they did a great job and a good work looking at this.
Okay, I'll play with the wording a little.
Just so you know, though, Lee, it is actually in the charter now. We added it. That was one of the amendments. So the charter, the finance committee is officially a charter. It's noted in the charter now.
Then that might be yeah, then maybe the point is moot at that point, if that's the case. But I would just think about that. I mean, that's true. If that's the case, then you have a finance committee. You have to have approval for any change. If that's what you want, then that's fine.
Yeah,
Then
finance-
it makes a lot more sense.
The finance committee, and David had made a comment in an email, and I think it would be good to add up front to say that the finance committee was adopted. Well, we already say it was adopted, but we could expand that a little to say that it's got 7 members. One is either the treasurer or the president. So that I can expand that just a little.
Yeah. Okay. Good job.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Yeah, because we only see the treasurer right down in the closing paragraph. So I think that just helps.
I'll expand the whereas a little.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So this is we're not actually voting on this today. This is a workshop item that we are, correct me if I'm wrong, that we are voting on at our February board meeting in a couple of weeks.
Right. The purpose of today was to find out if the board thought this was smart or dumb, and if the board was materially happy with it, which is what I would like the board to say today. I think I've heard that already. Then what we'll do is we'll polish some of the typos and expand the whereas a little, and then we'll come forward with a formal document at the February board meeting asking, because I think it should be approved at a board meeting by the board.
Yeah, absolutely. It's at that level of importance. Any other discussion from the board or the community or management? Neil, you're also on or I don't know if you're on the finance committee, you attended the finance committee.
He's a brave volunteer.
I'm the staff liaison to the finance committee. The only thing I would add, but Brian already said it, is just that working capital fund, I mean, that is your self-insure fund. And as Brian outlined, with the sophistication with our insurance policies, and you look at the max deductibles that we could potentially have, yeah, the working capital fund, it's, you guys self-insured, you did it the right way, but you've now kind of crossed that apex. And now I support 100% the finance committee's rework of this, because you've done everything the right way. So that $500,000 isn't as required as what it used to be for your self-insured liabilities and potential losses from storm. Again, emphasizing the updated insurance, or more the insurance that has more breadth and depth. But I think the committee, I mean, you guys don't get to see the committee meetings. I do, unless you voluntarily go. But this wasn't just a quick 20-minute thing. This was multiple months, multiple meetings. And what Brian didn't say, if I didn't hear him, they actually reached out to other organizations, looked at other best practices. So you're not going to get objection from me as the staff liaison on this.
Good.
So it sounds like you have our blessing, Brian.
You have our blessing.
All right, Susanna, we got to polish this. I'll work on it. You'll have something early next week.
Thank you all. This was a great job, great discussion. Thanks for sending in advance the proposed version and the prior version. I think that was helpful to look at that evolution. Our other major discussion is follow-up on Monday evening's capital improvements workshop. We spent a couple of hours, got a lot of good ideas. We just want to follow up. And then our last agenda item, it will be just looking at our upcoming workshops. We have one more workshop in February, and we'll talk about that agenda in about 45 minutes maximum. So just a follow-up on discussion. We had some takeaways, we had some suggestions, we've had a lot of dialogue. Where are we now? And let's just so that we can be clear and keeping the conversation going with the community, and then moving towards action. I think ultimately we want to be moving. We're in a hold period of making expenditures, approving expenditures. We've taken an inventory, we've had some discussions. We've heard things from from the report of a year and a half ago. And then we've heard through pickleball, we've heard from lawn sports, we've heard from other groups. Where to from here? Thoughts from the board first.
This is Vanessa. I'd be happy to go ahead and go first if nobody else has one.
Sure.
So first, I'd like to say thank you to management and staff for all of their efforts in getting everything together on this. I know this has been a very long-standing issue. in making sure, especially since we had the pause on all capital improvements. But I do want to make a couple of points, and I know I've sent messages to the board on this, but and that I mentioned a couple of concerns at the meeting on Monday night. But I want to officially read it into record, and then I'll also I'll forward this on to board and management to forward on as appropriate. So if you recall, we've had several conversations regarding options available to the board for repairs or repurposing of the amphitheater at Artisan Park. If you recall, according to the legal opinion, in order to remove or replace that amenity, a vote of the owners of the association is required. It's my belief the requirement for this vote for replacement or removal of the amenity is in place to prevent those ebbs and flows of elections affecting long-term plans from previous boards. However, the vote of the owners is there to allow for the board and the community to adjust something when appropriate, rather than just something that the board wants to do, the current board or the special interest wants to do. A request of the amenity replacement can easily be placed on ballot to affirm the community support, especially when it's done in conjunction with their annual election. You know, we did the vote for the owners that occurred for the charter and the bylaws and the revision in 2020. We established the capital improvement assessment in 2015 that went to the vote of the community. I think the careful consideration of this requirement of a vote of the owners should be taken regarding the removal or potential removal of one of the three fields. It was built less than 2 years ago. It's actively being used by organized field sports. The recommendation to replacement for pickleball and lawn sports will eliminate the ability to use the fields as it was originally designed less than 3 years ago. Our organized field supports were relocated to the civic corridor and the fields at the K8 to minimize large groups of vehicles and crowds in our neighborhood parks, which was the source of repeated complaints to the board from residents trying to navigate traffic through parked cars to get to their homes. The removal of the field at the civic corridor will force organized fields back to neighborhood parks, especially as residents of Island Village begin to move in over the next 5 to 10 years. The same consideration should be taken into account regarding the basketball courts at Lakeside. At a minimum, I think the new basketball court needs to be built in the location prior to the removal at Lakeside. So if you're going to remove something, it needs to already be in place somewhere else. And then I think there's going to be a huge community backlash in any efforts of relocating those basketball courts other than the civic corridor. Not in my backyard will be the mantra for this relocation effort. I can guarantee you that if the CROA board has learned anything, an effort to replace anything structured will absolutely, if it's in a view of a home, will cause huge issues and backlash to the board. I'll continue my passionate plea to really advocate for pickleball being placed in the originally slated location of Lot B. I think that's where a great location for it. And then lawn sports are currently over in East Lawn. I think we improved that area where they're already playing, as we had originally discussed. And then if the current basketball court is not in regulation down on Lakeside, improve it to make sure that it's actually regulation. These are going to be truly enhancement to our current amenities rather than just an improvised solution. So I think it's a legal issue that we need to be able to consult that. Thank you.
Very helpful, Vanessa.
David, let me follow up then on, because people are going to ask this question. So I think the section that Vanessa references is Charter Section 9.3, discontinuation of operation. Vanessa can correct me if I'm wrong. And what the first sentence says is the association shall maintain the common area facilities and equipment in continuous operation unless 2/3 of a quorum of eligible voters of the associated meeting or 2/3 of this threshold of the owners who cast a ballot consent in writing to discontinue the operation. So I think I agreed with Vanessa, we should have Tom Slade and the Pine. I don't think the three fields are soccer fields. I think the three fields are athletic fields, and we're talking about how they're used, but we should get the legal answer to the question. I did think the other day that we had agreed that we were still taking a hard look at Lot B. We've got a quote. We've still got the East Village quote. And we had asked the other day to have the group look at the first field to even see if it would fit and work, because we have not answered that question. And then it becomes a board decision as to A or B. Or you could pass on it. In basketball, the plea I heard the other day was give us full-size courts. We've already had other people, Lee earlier here, talk about parking. So I think we have to have a basketball court. The question is, where do we have to have the basketball court, and do we have that flexibility? So and Vanessa and I have talked about this, so I don't think she's shocked and I'm not shocked. So just so the picture is out there for people who are listening.
Yeah, just to clarify, Vanessa, thank you for that. Thank you for your detail in the email and then your description here. Just to put it on the table so we can take it off the table, the amphitheater was really, as I heard your discussion, that was when we got that clarification about taking away an amenity. We're not talking about the amphitheater today. That was a segue to talking about Field 1. Am I correct with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, because we've already decided as a
Yeah.
board that we're not doing anything with the amphitheater other than repairing it. So thank you
Absolutely.
for clarifying.
Absolutely. Yeah, just want to make sure that that was really a segue or the legal piece. So one thing to dovetail on Brian's point, I do think it is worth getting Tom's opinion, because that may negate use of Field 1 for potential repurposing purposes, or it may say it's okay. So I think that's just a side thing that we'll pursue that, see what that comes out as. But we're not talking about amphitheater. We're talking about, I think what we're talking about, I hear three things on the table: pickleball, and my conclusion from the discussion on Monday and prior discussions, as well as here, is we want pickleball, and we see two locations now. One is maybe Field 1, and the other is Lot B. Should we go the Lot B route? We have only one bid. We did not send it out for competitive bid. We got a bid a year ago. So we need to make, Brian, I think you're muted if you're trying to say something. Brian, you're muted.
Sorry, I actually think we got two bids, if I remember right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we only had one. But so we need to go out to bid to make it current. So anyway, pickleball is a priority. I think that's what I'm hearing. I also hear that lawn sports is a priority, and that's like croquet and whatever is part of lawn sports is. That's right now is at least lawn, and that can be rehabbed, and we have a quote on that. And then third priority also, these are not in order, but the third item is basketball. So making it regulation, is one court enough? And then what is the location for that? So I'm hearing three potential priorities. Is that a fair synopsis from the board?
If I can say something, David.
Please.
The question that came up the other day is, are we ignoring the 2019 facilities plan? My answer would be absolutely not. When we discussed this last year, early in the year, and then COVID derailed us, or even now, I mean, I think the board is very aware that some of the highest priorities were a community center, parking, performing arts center, some of that. Some of these solutions are very expensive solutions. So in my mind, I thought we as a board had moved to pickleball, adult sports like a croquet, the basketballs come up, because those are something more in line with our current budgets, where if we can give more residents a chance to participate, it'll allow us as a board to say, okay, how do we want to think about long-term funding solutions for some of these much more expensive items?
Absolutely.
I think just to piggyback onto that, I think it's also a deeper issue too. I think we basically determined that doing any type of a community center or anything like that on the civic corridor would probably not be something that we would want to do because of parking restrictions and all of the confusion and everything that goes along with doing something large in a confined area. So that's why we weren't even considering doing anything there in the civic corridor.
And I will agree with exactly with what Vanessa said, because even if we use Lot B, as she recommends, and might be a great idea, if we have soccer and if we have the dog park and if we have pickleball and croquet going on, Lot D for parking. I mean, if we don't leave room for parking, we're going to create suicide for ourselves. So we have to think about that in conjunction with it, which is part of the equation.
So then we have 4 potential initiatives: pickleball, lawn sports, basketball, parking, which is specifically like Lot D right now, what we're talking about. Is that a fair summary? Part of what we want to do is make sure that we're clear with management what we want as next steps. And one next step is just the legal review for Field 1.
I think it should be legal review on amenities and what we can do. I mean, you can make it Field 1, you can make it the basketball court. The question was asked, can we move it? So let's get
Okay.
clarity there.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one. Other comments?
David, yeah, David.
Diane,
This is
yeah, please.
Diana.
Yeah.
I think the next step should be going ahead and just getting good, complete comparative bids so we can see what, you know, the last bid for Lot B was not extensive enough, wasn't it? That we couldn't really review it, that it didn't cover everything that we needed to do pickleball.
I'm sorry, what was that question?
Was we don't have comparative bids right now where we can compare putting pickleball or actually doing the complete pickleball installation, do we? So the next step would be to get really completed bids that we can actually have something to review.
Yeah, Lot B is a year old. In Lot 1, we have nothing on because we've been waiting for the drawings. And one thing we haven't mentioned here, David, is we've still got to have the conversation with Arnco and the others about the field and the field repair issues, because we had said we wanted to do the repair too, and we haven't mentioned that.
Well, yeah, there's a couple.
I think
yeah, go ahead.
So I think the next step is getting the good hard bids that we have something to actually act on, because I think the decisions may change based upon the cost factor.
Well, yeah. Part of, another action item we did talk about on Monday was looking at the, if you will, the scope of work for the building of the fields, and is there any follow-up? Did they meet the scope? And is there any resolution on that? So that is a follow-up. A second item related to that is what I remember serving on the recreation committee 4+ years ago, and we did talk about, should we do artificial turf on all 3 fields? And cost said no, meaning it was too expensive, because it was like $800,000, I think, was the add-on for artificial turf per field. And we knew that after a rain, after a storm, there's unusability of the fields. We knew that. And we just said, that's what we're going to live with. We will have one that you can go back onto pretty right away after a storm. So we knew that. So if you will, the rework of fields 1 and 2, assuming that they are maintained with current status, that would be another item for an estimate once we determine what we're going to do with field 1.
Well, I think regardless of what we're going to do with field 1, we have to at least ask management to have a conversation with Arnco, share the studies, and get their feedback on what they think. Did they build them to spec on that? I mean, I think we're going to be pressured by the community big time to answer that question.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we do need that follow-up. That is important.
I think one thing that needs to be considered too, and I think we need to make sure when we're talking with Arnco and sharing the information. I mean, there is settling, right? We have our houses settle, everything settles. I don't know what the grade percentage is of when things settle or not settle. So I think that's something that just it's just a reality check. It's very possible that it's just because we had so much fill in there and fill settles. It's just the reality of what happens. So I think we need to be very mentally prepared for that as being a possibility.
Right, exactly. So next steps, I see Lee has his hand up.
Okay, well, thanks. Hey, appreciate everybody's time in this. I would say I agree with what Vanessa says. I would go back a little bit to the use and the recreation amenity plan and go back to why are we even thinking? I mean, I don't even know, you could talk to Tom Slayton all you want, but why are we thinking about getting rid of Field 1 and using it for a different purpose? The fields are being used. We need to grow sports for kids and adults, by the way, which uses it quite a bit for soccer. And it's not soccer, it's also lacrosse. We need to grow the lacrosse program. Lacrosse is one of the fastest growing sports in the country. Our high school has gotten lacrosse teams, both boys and girls, and it's growing. And I understand we need pickleball. I understood we needed a dog park, but I understood there was a place for it. It wasn't on these. So it's not like we have less use for the fields for adults and kids sports that don't include Field 1. We have more use. And right now it's a little bit down because of COVID, but the fact is, I'm not sacrificing getting a pickleball court for something else. And we shouldn't even be talking about that. We should be finding out where we can get a pickleball court and not take away an amenity that's important for something else. We could have 250 kids and their families on this phone if we needed to and stuff like that. But the point is that it's going to hurt us if we get rid of it. And I could tell you, we have never gotten those fields right. From day one, we said it didn't drain properly. And David, I think you're right, is that when it rains, you knew that we couldn't kind of use a field right after, it rained on those grass fields, but we didn't know we couldn't use it for 2 months in a row. You know what I mean? There is a problem with those fields. We need to fix those fields. And if there is an amenity that needs to be done, such as a pickleball court, we need to figure out how to get to it, but not sacrifice a dog park or a tennis court for it, or multi-use, fields that include, soccer and lacrosse and everything else. So, I would say I am all for pickleball, but let's find a place for it. Also, the last thing I would say is, I walk by, and we've talked about it before, all those tennis courts at the school, and I don't understand if you take those numbers, as Diana said, is, let's find out it costs, $400,000 to build, pickleball courts, or 500,000, or I don't know what it's going to be. But if we said to the school board, we have a plan, we're going to spend 200,000 or half of that, and we did X, Y, and Z, I think we can come up with a creative solution. I just don't think the easy solution, taking a field away, is the solution. So anyway, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lee.
David, if I can just respond
Sure.
on the school for Lee. 'Cause Lee, we actually visited with the school early last year before COVID made the world fun. And they were willing to work with us on the tennis courts, but then we were going to be provided almost zero access. They wanted ownership, but they didn't want anybody on the tennis courts if there were any kids outside at all, or if it was school hours, or if there was an after school event going on, or anything. And it really—
No, I get it. And we've talked about it before with them, and it's been over the years. I think that we could, if we could create some safety in it, where maybe there's access of one of them that they have access to, and maybe we have access to gated only outside. I think there could be something, and I agree with you, they're not easy, but I think that, when we find out, how much it's going to cost to do it the other way, we may be able to throw some money in that might make a difference, that will make them think differently. But I agree with you. They're not great to work with, and I appreciate you even talking to them. But I think we could do more. But I just don't think the overall is the easy solution is taking away another amenity. And so I appreciate you even going to the school, but there may be, plan B or C, but plan A shouldn't be taking away amenity that is going to be used more and more and needed more and more, as opposed to less.
Anything more on that, Brian, before I go to Steve?
If we're going to take a serious look at B, we did a quote, and there's no nice way to say this. We did a quote where the world was asked for. So maybe we should have a more simplified ask for lot B, where you don't have to have everything perfectly built out on day one. And I think that quote involved lights on the dog park. It involved putting in bathrooms. It involved all kinds of things. So we probably ought to take a fresh look at lot B. How many courts could we get in there? And, we've got the bathroom down at, is it a perfect location down by the sports fields? No, but it's not that far away. You could easily drive there if you had to. So I think we ought to take a fresh look at what we're looking at it before we go to a requote on B, so that we know cost is a reality. So let's get a comparison of field 1 and the lot B with a real thing.
Yeah, and then I think the lights, in the dog park group has been working on lights for ever since it opened, so that there's evening use during the winter, potential for evening use. So that would be, but I think that could be what do you call it? A price that separately. If you're doing it, what would it cost to add lights for the dog park and the pickleball? So getting some rich quotes on that. Steve Northridge.
Yeah, Steve Northridge, 1130 Tapestry Drive. First, to get back to the school potentially using this field for pickleball, I think that might be problematic from the standpoint of the noise associated with pickleball. Tennis is quieter than pickleball. Pickleball close to residential areas could be problematic. So I think that's something you got to keep in mind as well, but just as a side point. But regarding the engineering report that we received and we talked about on the February 1st meeting, there were a lot of things in there that's concerning. First of all, I thought the board requested a complete view of the civic corridor. Lots B and D were not addressed at all in there. In fact, Geotech actually did the borings for lots B and D, but they were not analyzed at all. There was no analyzing of those borings that were done in the Geotech report, nor in the MBV engineering report, so which is concerning because you really wanted to get an idea what their view was on those particular fields, and I think it's important to understand that. The other thing is regarding the existing athletic fields. The existing athletic fields, they specifically called out the slope and so forth, and it was talked about as opposed to the design, as opposed to the as-builts. The as-builts, from my understanding, are something that was after the completion of building the project, not where it had settled, but actually after it was built. So from my view, it was deficient to the actual design from the standpoint when it was completed construction, which is concerning. Second of all, it talked about the soils that were used underneath of it. They were not permeable, not suitable for the purpose of an athletic field. So I think the wrong soils were chosen. I'm not an expert in soils. I'm an engineer, but I'm not an expert in soils, first of all. But from my reading of it, it looks to me that the soils were deficient underneath the fields. It looks to me the slope as the as-builts were deficient. And further, the engineering report that we just received pointed out that there are certain standards for these types of fields from some National High School and Turf Association that would indicate that the slope was insufficient anyway and probably should have been crowned in the center. But so my point is, I think we can derive a lot from that engineering report, but I think it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. I think engineering report has to go back, and that could be used as potentially fodder for discussions with Armco and say, look, here's what we have from engineering. What's Armco's reaction to that? So I think that should be part of the discussion. And part of the solution could be, some mitigation. It could be, as David pointed out, making those fields artificial turf fields. There could be lots of different things you could do there, but I think it's in the community's best interest to understand what we really have and then try and go from that standpoint to be able to have a discussion with Armco. So that's some of my suggestions on that. Lot B, we talked about. Lot B was about $1.3 million is the big number that we got from Armco. McCree was about $900 and some thousand. Very difficult to compare the bids because Armco followed the format of the RFP. So in which the RFP was not of very sufficient detail, so it's hard to tell there either. But at least you could do apples and apples if you had McCree bid the same thing. McCree bid something completely different. So it's very difficult to understand what was included. If you break it down, the Armco bid, the $1.3 million, of that about $700,000 was really related to really the pickleball courts and the ancillary things that were required with that. The rest of it was the restrooms, the dog park lights and things like that, which were separate. So $700,000 and change, and some portion of $150,000 of the design work, which hard to understand what would be related to that. So let's call it, let's say maybe $900,000 in total. And that $900,000 in total also included putting in basically parking that was going to be perpendicular parking, much like you have at the dog park. And that required redoing the curbing, redoing the road, redoing, building those things. So obviously, that could be something that can potentially be deferred. Also, it talked about the fencing that would go around the outside and require key card access and things like that. So that potentially those could be deferred as well. So my point is, I guess, if we go back and do a bid, I would suggest that we get a lot more detail or ask for a lot more detail in the bids so you can really look at them and understand what was really being bid, and hopefully get several bids that are of quality bids, and then basically go out back and have a discussion with them and understand what the trade-offs are to basically really understand what we really can spend, what we really want to spend on these particular courts. So
Okay, thank you.
just some of my suggestions. Thank you very much.
But yeah, a bunch of items there, and that'll be helpful as we move towards a summary. Board thoughts on any of that? So just
I think you got a couple more hands up there.
Yeah. Just a couple of thoughts as I'm hearing, let's look at more at that engineering report. I'm also hearing, let's look, and I think this is a legal question. Do we have any recourse? Because did we accept the property? I mean, was the property done, were the fields done as we specified? And do we have any recourse at this time? I mean, that's a question. If we have no recourse, then, they're ours and we do what we can to make them right. But there may not be a legal recourse, but I think that becomes a question. John Trout, let's try to, we have 20 minutes more on this topic today. John Trout. So limit your comments if you would, please.
Yep, no problem. John Trout, 206 Drake Street. Just echoing, I guess, Lee and Vanessa, and we've been on the fields for now 19 months. I would ask probably just the board look at the flexibility as we do grow. I've spoken with Nikki and the team. Once we get out of this COVID period, it goes beyond soccer. We would like to do some free things for the kids, the community, the adults, have ways to put some events and activities on those fields, sponsored by, the adult programs or some way to allow more community access, because we do have the staff, the volunteers and the expertise to do that. So I would ask that the board really look at, if we bring repurpose the field, how do we grow and do these things that we've thought about for 19 months, because hopefully we get out of this COVID forever. And then 2, look at the aspect of the cost, the reservation system, and what free access, you want to have and do. It's all manageable, I believe. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Mike Jackson, please.
Thanks. I hope my microphone works today. We'll see how things go.
Sounds good, Mike. Sounds good.
Good, thank you. I guess Steve talked a little bit about the ARNCO bid, but I just want to clarify too, 740,000 of that bid that came in was just for site work, just getting it prepped. And that's from ARNCO, who obviously failed on fields 1 and 2 with grass on them. So that's their bid. So I suspect it's going to be north of that. And anything you do on Lot B is probably going to be in the million plus to do anything even bare bones there, would be my estimate. I understand the point of not repurposing something. I think you need to look at the legal aspect of it. I'm still concerned that maybe we don't need a third field. I don't know, but I think we need to make a fact-based decision. And I don't know what the utilization is currently. I know John sent me some information. I see the numbers of participations and so on, but I don't know what the schedule has been. And are 3 fields in use all the time? What's the projection for the next few years? I think that data should be brought to the table so we can really make an informed decision. Obviously, that would be moot if a legal opinion came back and said we can't convert the asset. But the asset, the field is 45,000 square feet. Lot B is 30,000 square feet. So you're going to be shoehorning in pickleball only on Lot B, which I don't think the pickleball people would have a problem with. I really don't. But you've got to deal then with the site prep. You got to think about lights, shade structure. Are you going to do bathrooms? All those kind of things that are going to run that price tag up. So from a fiduciary responsibility and trying to fund an amenity, I don't think you're in a position to fund a $1.3 million, $1.5 million amenity at this particular point in time.
No,
And I'm not sure if we should put that much money into something like Lot B. I don't know what you're going to put on Lot B, but just things to think about. But I would sure love to see a utilization study as to the use of the fields. And in that study, it really should indicate, are they external organizations that are coming in and renting the fields? Are they a lot of non-residents? Is it local organizations with residents? I mean, what's the mix of utilization there too? We should have that drilled down so we have that data. And then I think everybody could feel a little better about a decision one way or another. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mike. Other board comments or resident comments? Oh, Steve again. Steve?
Yes, thank you. I just want to clarify, Mike, suggested maybe you go back and look at the bids again. The $743,000 on the Arnco bid was related to site features. It wasn't just this site work. That was including environmental compliance, embankment grading, drainage, landscaping, parking, et cetera. That included the building of the pickleball courts. The additional items, under 2, 3, and 5 were were basically alternatives, things like the dog park lights and things like that. So the core number 743 was the construction of the pickleball courts on all the parking and the fencing and all that stuff. And obviously be some portion of there was a design cost that was in addition to that, was $158,000, but it's not clear what proportion of that would be related to the basic construction and not related to alternatives. So that's why I was saying,
Okay.
Argue maybe it's $800,000 or $900,000. The McCree bid, if you look at their bid, they talked about something around, very difficult to understand, but something around $500,000, but it wasn't clear what it was related to. It's not clear how they broke out the alternatives, but regardless of what the numbers are, Mike, I encourage you to really drill down on these estimates, and next time try and get better clarity on them, because it's as clear as mud, to be honest with you.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Steve.
So look at,
David, can I make a comment?
absolutely.
Okay, this is Diana, by the way.
Yep.
Okay, so we've talked about this at the meeting on Monday. We've talked about it now, and I think we need some clear steps
Yeah.
on what we're going to do before the next meeting. And I know
Yeah.
that's where you're headed,
Yeah.
but let me suggest, first of all, we do the Tom Slayton conversation to find out about the repurposing, whether that happens or not, just so we know what legal ground we're on. Someone needs to take the lead on the Arnco, follow up on how the construction deficit issues that we've talked about. But that's something that is a separate conversation from this on the legal aspect of it. We have what we have at this point. I think I think it might have been Lee put the comment that, the school tennis courts are there, but they need to get improved. They look pretty bad for our community. So we need someone to contact the school and see what they're willing to do to get those up to community standard. And then I agree with Mike Jackson's comment. We need to see a field usage. I want to know what's being used out there. So if we could hit those 4 points before our next conversation, I would feel like I had something to act on. At this point, I kind of feel like I don't really know. We've got a lot of conversations, but no action.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with 1 and then add 2 as we move towards our next meeting. So before I summarize it, what I would think would be helpful is for management to sit with the pickleball group, and this goes to where Mike and Steve were. It's like looking at that prior bid, but look at what the ideal would be for Lot B. Let's look at Lot B to develop that for pickleball. What does that look like? What does that look like in phases? If we had a phase 1 and a phase 2, that might also be in Lot B with 30,000 square feet. That might be 6 courts versus 9 versus 12. But engage the group, the pickleball people, to say, we sure would like some evening things in the winter, so lights would be helpful. Bathrooms could wait or not. Just what are the things? Parkings, of course, site preparation is essential, but what is the ideal for Lot B? So that's the pickleball piece.
Well, David, you've said ideal twice, and ideal in my mind almost means what is perfection. I mean, I really think we need to talk about what is practical here, because
That's fine.
I think, and I'm just trying to expand a little, because when we talk about Lot B, we know then we won't satisfy croquet and adult sports, which is going to have to go to East Village. So that when we do an apples to apples comparison, we're going to need Lot B plus East Village as compared to Field 1.
That's fair.
People ability to be flexible.
Yeah, yeah. And so again, I would go back, same dialogue with lawn sports. And, you know, I did say ideal, but then we tear it back to what is practical, what can we afford, what is reasonable, and think about the phasing, you know, so what can we do this year and what can we do next year? We have limited funding. I mean, so go ahead.
David, in conjunction with what you just said, I think that we need to be what's practical. I don't think it needs to be an ideal. I think it needs to be what's practical. What do you need, right? You look at our tennis courts. We have one simple shade structure in the middle. You have, you know, you walk the farthest courts. You're walking a distance to the bathroom. It's not close. So I think, you know, I think those types of things are important to recognize. But I think you know, you want your courts, you need, you know, do you need a shade structure? Well, you need, you know, we don't have them at the tennis courts. You have the trees around and you have one simple shade structure over a bench. So I think it needs to be a quality product.
Right.
But I don't think it needs to be perfect. But it does need to be practical.
And David, we haven't specifically said it, but we need them, being the adult sports and the pickleball, to also look at what the design would be for Field 1. So that when we actually have, I mean, I think we're gonna have to realize this is gonna take some time, but we need to take enough time to do this right, or otherwise we'll just end up with more questions, no answers.
So then the same thing is true for lawn sports. You know, we're looking at East Lawn. Again, we have a quote. Let's revisit that. The question about the school property, I know we've tried, Brian, you tried, Vanessa, in the last year. That's ideal. I think, yeah, that's ideal, but it may be a heavy lift on that. The thing that we had at the beginning was basketball, so we need to make sure basketball becomes part of the equation. So in the current location or a different location, what are our options? And I think going to Vanessa's early point on basketball, putting that in a community sounds like it would be the NIMBY approach would happen. So is there a place on the civic corridor? Is Lot B large enough to have basketball also, or no? Okay.
Not if we're going to put pickleball in Lot B. I mean,
I don't know. Yeah.
When we thought we were moving pickleball to Field 1, then we thought basketball and other things could go on Lot B. But I mean, so that's kind of where we're at.
That's fine. But we need to keep basketball in the mix is the point.
David, can I just make a really
Sure.
quick point? And then I noticed Eileen has her hand up too.
Right.
I think it's one thing, we're having a very good quality conversation about amenities and about how, you know, what are the next steps in order to make sure that the board has the data in order to move forward. I think it needs to be made clear that this board right now, as it is not the one that is going to be ultimately making these decisions, right?
That's
The
fair.
next board will be the ones that will actually be in place. We are currently on a hold freeze for any capital expenditures because we wanted to make sure that we had, we knew what was happening with COVID. So I just want to make that that clear because I know there's a couple of people on here that are new, that haven't really attended a lot of our meetings. So I want to make sure that they understand that although we are having these conversations, the information we're gathering is to move forward information for the incoming board.
Right.
And
Exactly.
to follow up on what Vanessa, she's 100% correct, because it would be impossible to get this much information that quick, but we're still moving forward with a concerted action for the next board to be able to make decisions at some point in the second quarter. I think that's a fair statement, or I think most of you would agree.
Yes. And we'll talk about the next, this board has one more workshop, which is in 2 weeks. And so we'll talk about that agenda, which ties into getting prepared for the next board with several new members. But that's the purpose of workshops, is we talk things through, we do deliberate, and then we're very planful. And so I think that this is a healthy discussion. I do want to get Eileen's point and then get a clear summary about next steps. What would we like as the next steps? Eileen?
Yep. Hello.
Hi.
Okay. Let me just review what I think I've been hearing and what's really important. One is usage. It seems to me that you need to find out whether or not the community needs 3 grass fields, what the usage is on those grass fields, and whether legally we are already locked into having to have an open grass field. There's many uses you can use for a piece of grass, notably events, various other things. But again, I think you've sort of got a plan going forward, hopefully, that you need to know what is the usage and potential future usage if we leave it as a grass field, the 3rd field, and legally are we locked into not being able to change it to something else? Because once it's changed, it can't go back to what it was. The other thing I'd like to say is about Lot B, and I think there really should be an emphasis on it, because Jerry and I went out to look at it yesterday, very often just ride by the dog park, and I'm amazed that it's actually there and so beautiful. But that lot between the CDD, that area between the CDD building and the dog park looks terrible. This is not something that should represent our community. And I think you really need at this point to take a look, what can go there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the summary, and I think that's a good point. Your second point is let's develop that property. Let's develop Lot B. I think that's your point.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's just it's
embarrassing.
embarrassing.
It really looks terrible.
I know it's embarrassing.
And one of the things, and I'd like to get this in quickly, is that whether or not we can have the money to put a bathroom with the dog park and Lot B, the bathrooms, to me, the bathrooms at the big complex should be open so people can use them if they're at the dog park or they're using Lot B. I agree that for tennis, we probably have to walk just as far to get to the bathrooms, but the bathrooms at the Civic Corridor are not open if you're just there with your dog or, there for some other purpose. Thank you.
Okay. I think that the bathroom issue being open is a separate item that we could look at availability. And I think we've also heard that in prior meetings, having the entire CCFC open even when there's not a scheduled event. So that's been discussed. So I think that's a future discussion. Can we summarize now before we move to the upcoming meetings and work on our agenda for the next workshop? And I have a proposal for the workshop. Summarizing, we have legal looking at any movement on amenities, and also legal looking at any potential recourse, if there is any, for what was already built. It was built, we accepted it. Is there any recourse? I think there's also a follow-up item with the engineering report itself. I think Steve noted the borings for lots B and D. I think the question that came from Mike, can we have some data about the utilization of the fields right now, knowing that we had a startup year and then we had a COVID year. So we don't have good metrics, but that is what we have, and what we have would be helpful. And I think that's a reasonable request. I think there's the discussion about pickleball and Lot B and lawn sports at East Lawn. What does a quality product look like? And then again, tiering it, if you will, first phase, second phase. Does that also?
You left off the conversation with Arnco.
I think Arnco was that part of the?
No, we said there needs to be a specific conversation.
Okay, yeah, yes, there's a
where they see the draft report, and they need to provide us their feedback, because they may say this is the exact specifications you gave me and here's where it is. I mean, and they may agree with the report that we have that, yeah, this is to fix this need, and they may say this is nuts. I mean, I thought we were going to.
I think that's, yeah, that would be parallel with the legal question of, do we have any recourse, so that we know if we have any recourse. I think a conversation with them is still warranted with Armco. Moving forward with, if we look at Lot B, what would that look like? Is that part of what we want? Do we want to go, one step is, what do the pickleball enthusiasts think is appropriate? What does management think is appropriate from knowing other pickleball arrangements?
They already have the drawings before. We would just need the pickleball people to look at Lot B with management, and we've got new management now, as we know.
And new eyes.
And we wanted those same, and it was both for the adult sports and the pickleball. We wanted them to look at East Village too, and then they were supposed to be doing designs on Field 1 so that we could have a complete sketch of all the different options.
Okay, so also look at designs on Field 1.
Let's make sure we get our legal opinions before we waste management's time on something that's not appropriate.
Absolutely. And we're not ready to get bids at this point. We're getting clarification on design in, if you will, 2 different locations.
I think if we have somebody reach out to Tom, we can get an answer very quick.
Yeah.
Will.
Okay. Does that sound like, and then we had the school property. I know we've tried and we can try again, but I think at this point, if we wait for that to be resolution, I mean, I think we need to be moving on our own track with the CCFC with that location, and then East Lawn. Parallel, we can look at the school property, because we can also have multiple locations. Go ahead.
I would say, I think that right now we've got plenty of things on our hands without pursuing this school, knowing that we're not going to be doing it. That's not going to be an easy, quick solution anyway.
Exactly, that's fair.
When the next board comes on, you guys can tackle that one.
That's very helpful. Is that an okay summary? Is that okay, Neil and Susanna? Is that clarified enough for you at this point?
I do. I feel like we have a little better clear direction now. We'll start with attorney and make our way from there.
Yeah, to me, the priority is just to verify with the attorney, which we already sent in this workshop over to Tom. But I think we're trying to we're trying to cram too much into the same conversation. If you guys just give us the opportunity to complete the discovery with the former engineer, the existing, and let's find out if there was truly a shortfall first, because I mean, anything beyond that, I feel like we're wasting our homeowners' time and money. But yeah, I have to assume coming away from Monday that at least those that were in attendance, the overwhelming demand right now is pickleball and lawn sports. I do understand that's not all, but I mean, if you look at previous reports and you listen to the past Monday, pickleball, lawn sports, those are clearly the priorities. And unless that changes, that's the direction we're going to go in, to continue to find more finite information for you guys to help make the next board make a decision.
Okay. Board, does that sound good? Are we okay?
Yep.
Just as we move forward, one of the items for the the upcoming workshop that's in 2 weeks, one of the proposed items is any update on this, any further discussion on capital improvements. So we may have some resolution on some of these by that time. That's not decision time, but it's helpful. Another item for that workshop, again, we have a workshop list of what we've covered over this year and a few remaining items that obviously we won't get to all of those. But one thing I think is important and is new and is not on that workshop list is a board conversation. It's a debrief on committees. We have 7 committees now, and we have 7 board liaisons, well, fewer than that. We have board liaisons, we have management liaisons. But what's our debrief on the committees and the role of board members with committees so that we can give those insights to the new board? Again, some of the board is returning, some are not. And so I just think it's helpful to debrief. What is helpful? And I think the larger context of this is with our committees, all volunteers, and the board is all volunteers. How do we best use our time? How do we best empower committees, but also knowing that committees are advisory or recommendation nature to the board? And how do we do this without burning committees out or board members out? I know many of us have many meetings outside of 2 workshops and 1 board meeting a month. So it's a matter of how do we maintain that? How do we maximize our time? This idea actually came from, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, yeah, it was Vanessa. Just really quick, one thing I think would be helpful in outlining this is I think you need to separate those committees that are actually identified within the charter.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
ARC, covenant, or ARC
covenants and finance.
And finance.
Good.
They require specific, like for instance, there's specific recommendations for who should actually be on the ARC, who should actually be on the finance committee, versus some of the other ones. I think that would be helpful if we even adjust our committee applications to specify that, because I think that'll make a difference as we move forward.
That's why we want to have this conversation before you term out, Vanessa. Of course, I'm sure we're going to hear from you. The new board would hear from you.
I'm going into hiding.
Fat chance. So anyway, so the idea, 1 agenda item, board debrief. Another agenda item, continue the capital improvements discussion. Another agenda item that we promised to do in the fall, we did it in January, so I think we said we would do it monthly, is the Spring Lake Gardens monthly update. So that was an agenda item. And then I think there's some others. Brian, there's been some other proposals that you've seen. I think that some of us have seen that we have to decide whether we address them at this workshop.
Well, I think it would be worthwhile at this workshop to spend a little time talking about the election, the annual meeting, and the orientation session. For example, we haven't had a conversation. Is the orientation going to be on Zoom or is it going to be in person? We have, further conversation on the annual meeting. There's just, because we know that we're going to have 3 new board members, so we need to get into the what's the transition going to look like into March? Plus, we'll have all the calendar stuff coming with the RFP, as David and Diana are both on the RFP, and we know that's all going to be coming hot and heavy in March. So whoever the 3 new board members are going to have to get up to speed on a lot of things very fast in early March to mid-March.
Yeah, so the annual meeting, which I think is taking shape, and then the
orientation. We haven't talked about the orientation at all. And I think, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? I mean, we know what we normally did in a real year, but I mean, if we said we weren't going to do it in person, well, Tom always has to give his thing where it's legally required. So how are we going to do all that stuff? So I think it's worthy. It may be boring for some residents, but I think we need to do some of these.
Okay. Any other things that have been floating? If you look at the list from that's posted with our agenda, is there anything else that this board wants to address? We had a few other. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I think perhaps if you want to, I mean, tennis is on. The tennis center is on here. It's if not addressed in February workshop. I don't know if we want to address that or punt that to the next board, which is fine. Just for clarification, that is not going to be that is not even being considered on the civic corridor. That's in an area that is not, just for clarification on that. And that is somebody else that is coming in, or it's a group of residents that is coming in. It would not be CROA funded. So just for clarification. And but I think it's important. I don't think that there's questions of not doing anything online, like questions of doing your board update and all that stuff, or your, excuse me, for your, the new board members coming in and your board training. I think it's fair to say all that's going to be done remote. That's going to be just done Zoom. So just call it what it is now and say that you're not going to be gathering groups of people together. In general, everything needs to be available on Zoom, because there are going to be residents or owners that or board members that are not going to want to go and be in a group setting. So I think you just need to make sure that you're planning Zoom or whatever the new platform is for the future.
Right.
Yeah. David, this is Diana. I completely agree. Everything's going to be on Zoom. What also about the transition to Teams? Do we need an update on that?
That would be a good thing to have, because we said with the new board, we were going to start transitioning email addresses and all that type of stuff.
So I don't know that we're going to have time for the tennis piece, but I think that whole annual meeting transition, orientation, teams and so forth can be part of a package. So that sounds like a full agenda. Anyone have anything else for that meeting, which is the board workshop 2 weeks from today?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, and then we can also talk about anything that comes out of the meeting 3 days before, which is joint with CCDD. That's a Zoom meeting, although with CDD's responsibilities and legal responsibilities, at least 3 of them have to be present in one space. But it's going to be a Zoom meeting and it's jointly run. Again, 3 agenda items. One is technology update from our technology committee. Another is some joint initiatives. And the 3rd agenda item for that one is just community engagement, community members who have something they want to ask or say, particularly from a joint perspective. Then we have a board meeting at the end of the month. Anything else for the workshop or any other discussion items for today?
You just have one hand up.
Okay,
David.
Okay, Steve, anything?
Yeah, just quickly, Lot D has not been put on the table. Lot D is something that a board wanted originally to get the borings and stuff so they can make an assessment of Lot D. Lot D might be a good alternative for some of these things, particularly if you consider the proximity of the restrooms, potentially shared parking, and also besides it's gated, it's already gated access. So that could potentially be some of the cost savings that are already buried in some of the other bids.
Okay, so Lot D, we just got to keep that on our radar.
Maybe it's not feasible because of drainage issues, but I think we don't know that at this point, I think.
Yeah, I think Brian pointed out that the challenge with putting too many facilities out, we have to attend to parking. Right. And I think that's what we're using right now for parking, but again, part of the discussion. Anything else from the board or from management for today? Susanna, anything? Neil, anything?
No, I think we have a full agenda for the next workshop and a couple meetings on the way. So it looks good.
We do. And we have Valentine's Day in between.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, don't forget. Any further discussion from anybody? Brian, Diana, Vanessa.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Vanessa. I was waiting for that.
Second.
Thank you, Diana. All in favor? Aye.
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 Bye. Happy weekend all. Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.